Top of the morning to you. I'm Clint Lambert. I'm host today of the Village in Motion. And today we have Justin Reeves from Finance, and then it's going to be followed with Kathy Craig from Hospice. But Justin, we're glad to have you with us this morning.
Yeah.
What's going on in finance these days?
Oh, it's fun stuff like always.
Oh, okay.
So just, again, Green Spring is just a wonderful community. Just financially stable, and all of our residents pay all their bills on time, which we like. So either way, we had a decent January. Of course, probably a little extra expense due to the blizzard,
right.
Some overtime, just clearing snow cost, et cetera, but nothing significant. So no worries there. And in February, we just got the results in, I want to say, end of last week, and we're looking good. We're right on track to budget. Yeah.
You mentioned overtime pay and everything. When an employee works over the allotted 40 hours or whatever their time frame is, do they get time and a half, or they just get what happens with overtime?
So honestly, it depends on job category. Out of our, I want to say 1,400 employees, we have so many different job categories: the nurses, the maintenance staff, engineering, et cetera. So it's just depending on the job code how they're paid out. Some get time and a half, some get weekend pay, some get just the additional hours times their regular rate. So it just depends.
Is there a shift differential if someone's working evenings or nights compared to days?
Again, depending on the job code. But yes, there are shift differentials between just evening shifts, weekend shifts, et cetera. So it would just be by the job code and job category.
Okay. And the same thing applies to our servers. If they work over their allotted number of hours, they then also get overtime in some fashion?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So when we are holding the students up because we're taking our time eating and enjoying the food, we're paying for it.
No, not necessarily. It's I would say worth the extra cost.
Yeah,
we wouldn't want to just rush them out there and just say, okay, clock out, you have to leave right now. But again, it all works out. No huge issues there with overtime. But I will say we continue just to invest in the community for the current and future residents. I know everyone's probably anxious to hear any updates from the repositioning.
Right.
As far as I know, it's still with the county. Just with the permitting process. Again, we're doing everything we can to move the process along, but it's just some things we can't. We can't.
The county only moves when the county decides to move, right?
We can't do anything about that. But again, it's. I always say when you're doing projects like this, it's worth taking the extra time and effort so you can get it right.
Right. With the repositioning, are we going to be able to find, have they made a decision whether we're going to finance it independently, or we're going to be borrowing against our own money? What's going to happen with that?
So it's because of the amount of our cash reserves, we're going to essentially finance it ourselves or pay cash for it. There's no need to go get a bank loan or take out any additional bonds. So that's the purpose of, as we continue to accumulate cash, we can do things like this, and we don't have to put ourselves, and it's not really risk, but leverage ourselves in any way to go receive some additional debt in any manner.
Okay. So when we build the extra wing on Garden Ridge, when that's completed, we won't have any bills in regards to outstanding.
We're paying as we go. Just think about it as a large, I'm sure a lot of us have owned homes, just a large contracting project. Just think about redoing your kitchen or adding that wing onto your home, and you're just paying for it, and you don't have to take a loan out for it. So at the end, after we go through the final checks, and we write the final check, and we move on.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
And do we have an estimate of how much we figure the entire project will cost with Garden Ridge?
Yes. So we estimate right around $48 million over 4 years.
Okay.
So the project should start, if it started today, we should be finished in 2020. And of course, there are different variations of cost. And I think the brunt of the cost is within the first and second year. At $20 million the first year, probably $15 million the second year, and the balance in the last 2 years.
And so we pay as we go?
We pay as we go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. You know, you mentioned the fact as we accumulate resources, or as we accumulate money, is there a figure that we try to accumulate each year, or percentage of our income? Yeah,
so based on the budget, we usually try to hover around, I want to say, anywhere from 14 to 16% of our, let's say, net operating income. And if we think about that, that's the cash generation of kind of what we save throughout the year, so we can add to our cash reserves so we can do additional projects going forward. So it's right around 14 to 16% of our revenue that we try to save, or let's call that our net profit.
Okay. Is that kind of an industry-wide goal, is to save that much or to make that much?
So we look at a lot of metrics of the nonprofit sector, the for-profit sector, and they're industry metrics, but as you know, they're just by company by company, community by community. It's a little different, but Green Spring is in a wonderful position in terms of location, demographics, our occupancy levels, where we can sustain these higher level of savings. Just imagine a lot of communities who just aren't as beneficial as we are. They can't save as much money. Mm-hmm. So when they do a repositioning or a larger project, they have to constantly go back to the bank, ask for more money, pay interest. So we're just not in that position. And just want everybody to be clear, is this is a nonprofit organization that kind of maintains a certain level of profit, but it's regenerated through the organization. So it's not a corporation where we're taking dividends or just any sort of profit sharing or anything like that. So all the money that stays at Green Spring is at Green Spring for just a rainy day, so to say, or for future investment.
Okay. With that, because I've heard people complaining about the fact that we've got too much money. We keep on setting money aside, money aside. Do we have a point that we say, this is time now to move forward with something? I mean, that we've got enough money set aside to start really looking at a project, or how does that go?
So if we're fortunate enough to have enough cash reserves, and it's right around $145 million, to look at a repositioning project and say, yes, this is the time we can move forward with this. When Town Center, the repositioning project, comes up, we'll be able to move forward with that. So we're constantly looking at ways to use the cash beneficially for the community, current and future. So it's there's no one point or $1 figure that we look at, but as we continue to save money and reinvest in the community, we just have to make sure we're not spending all the money in one shot, and we continue to save accordingly. Okay.
And so we try to stay at a maximum of $145 million. I mean, would that be a justified?
No, I wouldn't say that would be justified. I know per our covenants, we only have to have 125 days of cash on hand. We're right around 660 or so. So we want to have that nice buffer, but knowing we want to do these large projects down the road. Again, there's no dollar figure I'm targeting, but at the same time, as long as we have those healthy margins and we continue to save cash on a regular basis, I'll be comfortable with where we are.
But you said we are required to have 600,000 plus?
No, so we're required to have, the metric is days cash on hand. Okay. So if Green Spring did not earn another dollar today, how long would we be able to continue to operate? The metric per our bond agreements is 125 days, and we're currently at 660 days.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so that's where that 145 million comes in.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's fun stuff.
Fun stuff, right? It's all numbers. Crunch the numbers, right?
Crunch them.
You also had said the fact that our residents pay the bills. We pay on time. Do we have a percentage that doesn't pay on time, or?
No, it's a very small percentage. I know the moment the bills go out, and we're getting tons of envelopes and tons of checks the next day and pretty much the next 2 weeks thereafter.
Tremendous.
Yeah, of course. I mean, just sometimes people may be in the hospital or maybe their family members didn't pay on time. But again, we don't start charging any interest or fees until down the road, because 1 month we know things happen. We don't want to arbitrarily charge any interest or fees.
So the interest and fees begin, after 60 days?
Probably 60 days, 60 or 90 days or so. Okay. But again, we haven't run into any huge problems. We know things happen and we understand, so we just continue to work. If we see that someone's over 60 days or 90 days, we just give them a call and just ask what's going on, and we can usually resolve it pretty quickly.
Super.
Yeah.
When someone goes over to Garden Ridge from independent living to assisted living or to skilled nursing, the money that they have and they have been using in independent living, is that just transferred over, or are they getting billed for both independent living and Garden Ridge facility at the same time?
So they are, if they do not release their independent living unit, they are being billed for both, but you are receiving a non-occupancy credit after 10 days in your IL unit.
Okay.
And good, I'm glad you brought that up because, excuse me, I'll plug a forum that's coming up probably in May or so, where we're going to talk about the transition from IL to continuing care, and we'll have several members of the management team, several members of other departments to really talk about some of the details. We're also going to put out a document called Frequently Asked Questions. Transition to Garden Ridge Frequently Asked Questions for questions exactly like that. So for family members, for the residents, for POAs, and just stay tuned. It'll be out soon.
All right. So we're getting some documents to come out to answer the frequently asked questions to better explain the transition from independent to continuing care.
Correct.
The other question that people have often asked is how long do I have to continue, or my family or heirs have to continue to pay when I no longer am living here? What is it, up to 3 months?
So it's a 90-day obligation, up to 90-day obligation, depending on if, especially in independent living, if your unit settles or not. So you can clear out your unit, provide us with all the paperwork, and someone could move in the next 2 weeks, and you would just be obligated for that 2-week period.
Oh, okay.
But if no one moves in up to 90 days, you would be obligated for that 90-day period.
So it's all dependent on how fast your unit is reoccupied?
Correct.
And is that from the time somebody signs the dotted line or actually moves in?
Well, we asked them if we can start marketing the unit as they're kind of cleaning up, just to start the process. Because again, we have a high occupancy rate, but some units just sell faster than others. So the sooner we get it on market and we can start showing it, the better for you.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, you have certainly provided us a lot of information this morning, as you always do.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it, Justin.
No
and
problem.
If anybody has any questions about finance, stop by and see you, right?
Stop by and see me. I'll be there.
Very good.
All right.
Again, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.